The stars were silent, and the galaxy believed humanity was gone. Long ago, the last signal from Earth faded, and alien civilizations marked humans as extinct. For them, humanity was only a story, a ghost of the past. Some aliens remembered humans with fear, others with respect, but most thought they had vanished forever. No one expected them to return. In the deep cold of space, near the forgotten edges of a destroyed colony, something moved. A ship, dark and heavy, drifted through the shadows. It carried no lights, no markings, nothing to announce itself. Yet its presence was undeniable. The vessel was not alien. It was human. For centuries, the war fleets of humanity were silent. But silence does not mean death. Hidden far away from the eyes of the galaxy, humanity had been preparing. They had been watching, waiting, and building. And now, one fleet was moving back into the stars. On the command deck of the ship Resolute, Captain Eric stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were locked on the holographic display of the stars ahead. His face was calm, but his crew could feel the weight in his silence. They all knew this mission was more than just a return. This was the first step to remind the galaxy that humanity was not gone. "Status report," Eric said quietly. "All systems running, Captain," replied Commander Talia, his second in command. Her voice carried both discipline and excitement. She, like the others, had trained her whole life for this moment. None of them had ever seen another species with their own eyes. To them, aliens were only stories, old recordings, old wars. Yet tonight, those stories would become real. The fleet was not small. 20 warships followed the Resolute, each one armed with weapons that had never been tested in real battle. Humanity had advanced in secret, creating technology the galaxy had never imagined. Plasma lances, stealth shields, and rail cannons that could shatter moons. They were weapons built not for survival, but for vengeance. As the fleet crossed into alien territory, the sensors picked up faint signals. Not natural. Artificial. Alien voices in the dark. The crew held their breath as the first transmissions echoed through the comms. The words were not clear, but the tone was obvious. Surprise. Shock. "They've seen us," whispered a young officer. Captain Eric nodded. "Good. Let them see." Far away, in the core worlds of the Valari Empire, alarms began to sound. The Valari were one of the strongest powers in the galaxy. For centuries they had claimed humanity was gone, wiped away in the ancient wars. Now, their patrols reported something impossible: human warships. At first, the Valari commanders laughed. They thought it was a trick, an illusion, maybe pirates using stolen technology. But when more reports came in, the laughter stopped. The description of the ships matched old human designs, but far more advanced. And then, the most terrifying part, the fleet was moving with precision, discipline, and purpose. Back on the Resolute, the crew watched as alien ships appeared on the edge of their radar. Small patrol vessels, weak compared to human warships, but fast. They were not here to fight. They were here to watch. "Should we engage?" Talia asked. Eric shook his head. "Not yet. Let them run. Let them carry the message." The alien ships circled cautiously, then vanished back into hyperspace. The crew exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. The galaxy would soon know. Humanity had returned, and they had not come in peace. Hours passed in tense silence. Then finally, the fleet reached its first target, the ruins of Chorus Station, an old human outpost destroyed long ago during the fall. The station was nothing but wreckage now, floating in silence. But it was a symbol. The aliens had left it as a warning, a reminder of humanity's defeat. The Resolute slowed as it entered the debris field. The crew looked out at the twisted metal, the burned walls, the silent bones of their history. No one spoke. Even Eric's face was grim. For a moment, the entire fleet floated in mourning. Then, with a cold voice, Eric gave the order. "Ignite the beacon." A massive device unfolded from the ship's hull. It was not a weapon, but a signal. The beacon roared to life, sending out a pulse that lit up the stars. Every sensor in the region would feel it. Every alien empire would hear it. The message was simple, undeniable, and clear. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was back. And humanity had a fleet. The crew felt a shiver as the beacon's message spread across the galaxy. Some smiled, some clenched their fists, some whispered prayers. This was not only a return. This was a declaration. But as the beacon's light faded, the sensors began to scream. Something was coming. Not just patrols this time. Not small ships. A Valari war group was already on its way, faster than expected. And they were not coming to talk. Captain Eric turned to his crew. His eyes burned with cold fire. "Then let this be our answer," he said. "Prepare the fleet for war." The stars around them seemed to tighten. The silence before the storm had ended. Humanity's war fleet was no longer a secret. And the galaxy was about to remember why they once feared humans. The first alien warships dropped out of hyperspace like blades of fire. Their hulls glowed with strange energy, weapons already primed. They were Valari, one of the oldest enemies of humanity, and they came with no hesitation. To them, humans were supposed to be dust and bones. Yet now, before their eyes, a fleet of human warships stood ready. On the command deck of the Resolute, red lights flashed across every console. The crew moved fast, their training sharp and precise. But beneath the discipline, there was something deeper: anger, excitement, and the weight of history. "Enemy fleet detected," Talia reported. 8 cruisers, 2 carriers, and a swarm of fighters. The officers looked at Captain Eric, waiting for his word. His eyes stayed on the tactical map, where the alien formation moved in tight precision. He had studied Valari tactics all his life, in simulations, in training drills, in ancient recordings. But this was no drill. "They will test us," Eric said softly. "We will show them we are not weak." The first alien transmissions came across the comms. Harsh, distorted, and filled with scorn. The Valari commander demanded identification, demanded surrender. He claimed the humans were only pretenders, scavengers using stolen ships. Eric gave no reply. Instead, he looked at Talia. "Target their lead cruiser. Prepare rail cannons." A hum filled the Resolute as the massive weapons charged. The crew held their breath as the alien fleet drew closer. The Valari opened fire first, beams of green light cutting across space. Energy blasts exploded against the shields of the human fleet, shaking the hulls but not breaking them. "Shields holding," shouted an officer. "Fire," Eric commanded. The rail cannons released. From the Resolute and her sister ships, streams of molten metal screamed across the void at near light speed. The impact was instant and brutal. The Valari lead cruiser shuddered, its armor split apart like paper, and in a flash of white fire it was gone. The crew erupted in cheers, but Eric's voice cut through. "Focus. They are not beaten yet." The Valari regrouped quickly, unleashing wave after wave of fighters. Swarms of alien craft darted like knives toward the human ships. But humanity's fleet was ready. Small defense turrets rotated, spitting fire, tearing the swarms apart with brutal precision. Plasma lances carved paths of light through the chaos. 2 enemy fighters down, 5 down, 20 down. The battle grew fierce. Space burned with explosions, metal twisted, ships shattered. Yet through it all, the human fleet moved as one, each ship holding formation, each crew fighting without fear. They had trained for this moment, lived for this moment. But the Valari were not weak. Their carriers unleashed new waves of drones, machines without fear or hesitation. They swarmed the human ships, trying to overwhelm through sheer numbers. The Resolute shook as drones slammed into its shields, detonating like living missiles. Sparks flew across the bridge, smoke filled the air, but the crew kept their stations. "Shields at 60%. Talia shouted. Eric's voice was calm. "Focus fire on their carrier. Break their swarm." The order spread through the fleet. Rail cannons reloaded, plasma lances flared, missiles streaked through the darkness. One Volari carrier buckled under the assault, its engines rupturing, its body breaking apart in a cloud of fire. The drones fell silent, drifting useless in space. The humans pressed forward. Their weapons were faster, sharper, more deadly than the Volari expected. For every human ship damaged, 3 alien ships fell. The Volari commander hesitated, his fleet breaking formation, his arrogance shaken. "Captain, they are retreating," Talia reported. Eric's eyes narrowed. He saw the movement on the map, the Volari fleet pulling back, engines burning. Not a surrender. A retreat. A warning. They were not running from fear. They were running to call for more. "Let them go," Eric said. "Their escape is the message." The crew looked at him in silence. He was right. Already, across the galaxy, the Volari were preparing to spread the word. Humanity was alive, and they were dangerous. But victory had a price. 2 human ships were damaged, one heavily. Fires burned in the corridors, and med bays overflowed with wounded. The fleet had survived its first battle, but the war had only begun. As repair crews worked and medics rushed, Eric walked the halls of the Resolute. He saw young soldiers with blood on their uniforms, engineers with burned hands, officers with hollow eyes. Yet none of them showed fear. They looked at him with determination. They wanted to fight again. In the quiet of the observation deck, Eric stood alone, staring out at the ruins of Chorus Station and the wreckage of the alien fleet. His reflection stared back in the glass, a reminder of the weight he carried. Humanity had returned to the stars, but now the stars would answer with fire. Talia's voice broke the silence. "What now, Captain?" Eric did not look away from the stars. His voice was steady, filled with cold resolve. "Now we remind the galaxy why they once feared us." And somewhere, in the dark corners of space, the Volari Council already prepared their response. Larger fleets. Deadlier weapons. They would gather allies, warn other empires. For if humanity was truly back, then the galaxy faced a storm it had tried to forget. The war had just begun. The battle at Chorus Station sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Signals raced from system to system, carrying the impossible truth: humans were back. Not broken, not scattered, but strong. Strong enough to destroy a Volari fleet in open combat. On alien worlds, the news spread like wildfire. Some empires laughed in disbelief, calling it a Volari trick. Others trembled, remembering the old wars, when humans had fought with fire and fury. Old soldiers whispered in dark corners, telling stories of human fleets that never surrendered, of human commanders who turned defeat into victory. In the council chambers of the Volari Empire, panic and anger collided. The Supreme Commander stood tall, his eyes blazing as he addressed the council. "You promised me humanity was gone." His voice shook the chamber. "You promised me they were ashes and dust." A science minister bowed low, trembling. "We believed it true, Commander. For centuries, there was no signal, no fleet, no trace. But now, the commander growled, "they have returned with weapons beyond ours. This is no scattered tribe. This is a war fleet." The council erupted into arguments. Some demanded an immediate strike, a full mobilization of Volari forces. Others urged caution, warning that humanity's strength was unknown. But one truth burned in every alien heart: the humans could not be ignored. While the Volari debated, other empires listened. The Vara Syndicate, masters of trade and shadows, sent spies to learn more. The Kral Dominion, a brutal warrior race, felt excitement at the thought of a worthy enemy. And far away, the timid Lauren Unity prayed that the humans would pass them by. Back aboard the Resolute, the human fleet repaired its wounds. Engineers worked day and night, patching hulls, recharging shields, and testing weapons. The air smelled of smoke and metal, but the crew walked with their heads high. They had faced their first battle, and won. In the strategy chamber, Captain Eric stood with his officers around the glowing star map. Points of light marked alien systems, trade routes, colonies, and fleets. We cannot stay hidden anymore, Eric said. His voice was calm, but every word carried weight. The galaxy knows we are here. The Valari will not stop. They will gather allies. Soon, the others will choose sides. Commander Talia leaned forward. So do we wait for them to come, or do we strike first? The room was silent. The officers looked at Eric, waiting for his choice. He had been trained for this moment his whole life, yet the decision was not simple. Strike too fast, and humanity risked awakening the full force of the galaxy. Wait too long, and the enemy would grow stronger. Eric's eyes hardened. We move. We take back what was once ours. We show the galaxy that humans do not hide. We fight. The officers nodded, their faces set with determination. Plans formed quickly. Their first targets would not be major alien strongholds. No, the fleet would strike abandoned human colonies, places long lost, and raise their banners once more. Each colony reclaimed would spread a new message: humanity had returned, and the stars were their home again. Their next destination was Arden Prime, a world once known as the jewel of human expansion. The Valari had burned it during the last war, leaving only ruins. But beneath those ruins might still lie resources, data, and memories. It was more than a planet. It was a symbol. The fleet moved in silence through hyperspace, shadows cutting through the void. When they emerged above Arden Prime, the crew fell silent. The planet was scarred. Cities lay in ruins, broken towers jutting like bones from the surface. Oceans shimmered with strange alien pollution. Forests were gone, replaced by wastelands of ash. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Eric said quietly, "This was our home, and we will make it ours again." But the planet was not empty. Alien outposts glowed across the surface, Valari research stations studying the ruins of humanity. Their ships hovered in orbit, smaller than a fleet, but enough to stand guard. Talia's eyes narrowed. "They are desecrating our dead." Eric's voice turned cold. "Then let them pay the price." The human fleet moved into position. Stealth shields shimmered, weapons hummed to life. The Valari outposts did not notice at first. They thought humanity would never return to this graveyard. They thought the ruins were only history. The first strike was sudden and brutal. Human missiles rained down on the orbital defenses, tearing them apart before alarms could even sound. Rail cannons fired in silence, ripping through enemy hulls with terrifying speed. The Valari ships broke instantly, caught in confusion and fear. On the surface, the outposts scrambled to respond, but it was too late. Human dropships roared through the skies, soldiers in black armor storming the alien bases. Blaster fire lit up the ruins, echoes of war filling the air once more. The Valari scientists screamed as their defenses collapsed. They had studied humanity as if it were a dead species, never believing the dead would rise. Within hours, Arden Prime was theirs again. The human flag rose above the ruins of the old capital, torn but defiant, a symbol that the past was no longer lost. The crew of the Resolute stood together, watching the flag wave in the bitter winds. Some cried quietly. Others clenched their fists. For them, this was not just victory. It was homecoming. But far above, in the depths of space, signals were already moving. The Valari Council had heard of the loss. And they were furious. The storm was building. The flag of humanity still waved over the ruins of Arden Prime when the warning came. Alarms echoed across the Resolute, red lights flashing like angry eyes. "Multiple hyperspace signatures incoming," shouted an officer. "It's not a patrol. It's a fleet." The bridge fell silent. Everyone already knew what it meant. The Valari were coming. Captain Eric stood tall, his face calm but his voice sharp. "Report numbers." The officer's hands trembled on the console. "At least 30 warships. Heavy cruisers. Carriers. Battleships. More than double our fleet." Whispers filled the bridge. Humanity had won battles in secret, trained in hidden space, but never faced such numbers. This was the true test. Commander Talia leaned close to Eric. Her eyes burned, but her voice was steady. They want to crush us before the galaxy believes in our return. Eric gave a slow nod. Then we show them they cannot. Outside, the stars tore open as the Valari Armada arrived. Their ships filled the void like a storm, their weapons glowing with alien power. The Valari commander broadcast at once, his face appearing on human screens. "You are relics," he snarled. "Shadows of a dead race. Today, humanity ends for good." Eric did not answer. He only gave one order. "All ships, battle stations." The fleets clashed. The sky lit up with fire. Valari energy beams slashed through the void, hammering human shields. Rail cannons thundered in reply, each shot tearing holes in alien armor. Missiles streaked between ships like burning stars, exploding in clouds of shrapnel. The Resolute shook as blasts struck its shields. Sparks flew across the bridge, alarms wailed, but the crew stood their ground. "Shields at 70%, shouted an officer. "Hold formation," Eric commanded. His eyes never left the tactical map. "Target their carriers. Cut off their swarm." The fleet obeyed. Human ships moved in precise formation, weaving fire across the enemy lines. A Valari carrier shuddered, then burst into flames, drones falling silent around it. But the Valari did not break. More ships surged forward, surrounding the humans, pressing with relentless force. For every alien ship destroyed, 2 more filled the gap. A human frigate exploded, its fireball tearing across the void. The crew of the Resolute watched in grim silence. They had no time to mourn. Talia clenched her fists. "They're trying to pin us against the planet. If they trap us, we're finished." Eric's eyes narrowed. "Then we break through." He called out to the fleet. "All ships, concentrate fire on the center line. Open a path." The humans unleashed everything. Rail cannons roared, plasma lances cut arcs of light, missiles tore through the black. Alien ships cracked, their formations shattering. Slowly, painfully, a hole opened in the Valari wall. But the price was high. Another human destroyer fell, its hull breaking apart under a storm of alien fire. Medics screamed in the comms as hundreds were lost. The fleet was bleeding. On the ground below, human soldiers held the ruins of Arden Prime. They watched the skies burn, listening to the battle through comms. Each explosion felt like a heartbeat. They knew their survival depended on the fleet above. Back in orbit, the Valari commander laughed. "You fight well, humans. But you are outnumbered. You will fall." Eric finally replied, his voice cold as ice. "We do not fall. Not now. Not ever." With a sharp gesture, he gave the signal. The Resolute's secret weapon came alive. Deep in its hull, a new system powered up, a plasma storm generator, humanity's most dangerous creation. Energy crackled across the ship's spine, building to a terrifying glow. "Release," Eric said. A storm of white-blue fire erupted from the Resolute, sweeping across space. Valari shields flickered, cracked, and died. Ships overloaded, weapons fell silent, engines sparked. In seconds, the front line of the Valari fleet was in chaos. The human fleet surged forward, striking like wolves into a wounded herd. Rail shots tore through exposed hulls. Missiles hammered crippled ships. Valari formations collapsed. But the storm came with a price. The Resolute shook violently, its systems drained, its shields flickering. Sparks burned across the bridge, smoke filled the air. "Shields at 20%, an officer cried. "Hold steady," Eric said. His voice never broke. "This is our chance." The humans pressed the attack. Another Valari carrier fell, then 2 cruisers. The alien commander's voice filled the comms again, no longer laughing but raging. "Impossible. You should not exist. You should be ash." Eric's reply was simple. "We are humanity. And we are your nightmare." The battle raged on, fire against fire, steel against steel. The Valari still had numbers, still had strength, but now they had doubt. And doubt was a weapon humanity knew well. On Arden Prime, the human flag waved above the ruins as the sky lit with fire. Soldiers raised their fists, shouting with fierce pride. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood against the galaxy, and did not break. But victory was not yet certain. The Valari were wounded, not destroyed. More ships were coming. And in the shadows of the galaxy, other empires were already choosing sides. The war for survival had only just begun. The smoke of battle still hung above Arden Prime when silence fell over the human fleet. The Valari had retreated, leaving behind wreckage and burning ships. But the cost was heavy. 2 human warships destroyed, hundreds of lives lost, and the Resolute itself wounded, its hull scarred with deep burns. On the bridge, Captain Eric stood with his hands behind his back, his face carved from stone. The crew expected relief, even celebration, but his eyes told another story. He knew this victory was not the end, it was the beginning. The Valari are hurt, Talia said quietly. But they will not stop. They will return with more. Eric nodded. And this time, they won't come alone. Far away, in the core of the galaxy, the news spread like fire. The Vara Syndicate, the shadow empire of traders and smugglers, listened with greedy ears. If humanity had weapons that could break Valari fleets, then there was profit to be made. In the steel halls of the Krall Dominion, war drums thundered. The Krall were warriors born, their empire built on conquest. They laughed when they heard humans had returned. For them, this was not a threat, it was a challenge. They wanted to test their blades against the warriors of old. And in the Loran Unity, a timid council of scholars and diplomats, fear spread like poison. They remembered old stories of human wars, of planets burning, of fleets leaving nothing behind but ash. To them, humanity was not a people reborn. Humanity was a storm. The galaxy watched, and the galaxy prepared. Back aboard the Resolute, the crew worked without rest. Engineers patched broken systems. Medics filled the corridors with stretchers. Soldiers polished their weapons, ready for the next fight. Yet through the exhaustion, there was a spark in every eye. Pride. They had stood against the Valari, and survived. In the strategy chamber, Eric and his officers studied the star map. The beacon from Chorus, the victory at Arden Prime, the battle against the Valari fleet, it had all drawn attention. Now the galaxy's eyes were locked on them. Talia tapped the glowing map. We can't keep moving blindly. The other empires will soon choose. Some may offer aid, others war. We must know who is with us, and who is against us. Eric's gaze was steady. We will find out soon enough. And he was right. Within days, the first message came. It was from the Vara Syndicate. Their envoy appeared on the comms, a smooth-tongued alien with eyes like polished glass. His smile was wide, but his words were sharper than knives. Humans, the envoy said, his voice like silk. The galaxy believed you gone. But now, you rise from the ashes. Impressive. Dangerous. Profitable. The Syndicate does not wish to fight you. The Syndicate wishes to trade. Talia whispered, trade? Or spy? Eric did not answer. He only said, what do you want? The envoy's glassy eyes gleamed. Weapons. Technology. Alliance. Together, we could shape the future of the stars. Of course, the Valari will hate us both. But business is sweeter when the enemy burns, yes. The offer was tempting, but dangerous. The Syndicate was known for lies, for selling allies as quickly as enemies. Eric gave no answer. He closed the channel, leaving only silence. Hours later, another message came. Not from traders, but from warriors. The Krall Dominion. Their warlord appeared on the screen, towering in armor, his voice like thunder. Humans, he growled. At last, prey worth hunting. You fight with fire. Good. We will test you. We will see if the old stories are true. Talia muttered, "They don't want peace. They want war." Eric's eyes narrowed. "Then they will have it, if they force it." The messages continued. Some empires warned humanity to stay away. Others begged for alliances. Some remained silent, watching, waiting to see who would bleed first. But the Valari, they did not send messages. They gathered fleets. Scouts reported massive movements at the edge of Valari space. Entire armadas were being called. Shipyards burned day and night. War was coming. The crew of the Resolute felt the weight of it. Each victory drew more enemies. Each battle echoed across the galaxy. Humanity had risen, but now the galaxy itself was rising to meet them. In the quiet of the observation deck, Eric stood alone, staring at the stars. He thought of Earth, long lost, of ancestors who had fought and fallen. He thought of the crew who had already died, of the world still to reclaim. Talia joined him, her eyes on the same stars. "Do you ever wonder if we can win?" Eric's answer was calm, but it burned with fire. "Winning is not the question. Surviving is. And if the galaxy wants to test us, then let them. We will show them what it means to be human." Above Arden Prime, the human fleet shone like a scar against the night sky. Not broken. Not beaten. A storm waiting to break. And across the galaxy, the storm was coming. The galaxy was no longer quiet. Everywhere, fleets moved. Messages crossed the stars. Some spoke of fear, some of greed, some of war. Humanity had risen, and now the galaxy itself stirred to meet them. On the Resolute, Captain Eric listened to the latest reports. Scouts had returned from Valari space, their voices tense. "The Valari are gathering everything, Captain. Battleships, carriers, cruisers. An armada, larger than anything we've seen. They are not coming for a battle. They are coming for a war." The bridge fell silent. Even the sound of machines seemed to fade. "How long until they arrive?" Talia asked. "Days," the scout replied. "Maybe less." Eric's jaw tightened. He had expected this. Every battle, every victory, had brought them closer to this moment. The Valari would not stop. They wanted not just to destroy humanity, but to erase even the memory of it. But there was more. Other fleets were moving too. The Krull Dominion had deployed warships to the edges of human space. The VRA Syndicate had sent envoys, offering trade in exchange for secrets. And the timid Lauren Unity had called for a council meeting, begging for peace, even as they fortified their borders. The galaxy was converging. Eric stood before his officers in the strategy chamber. The star map glowed, showing fleets moving like fire across the void. "They think we are weak," Eric said. His voice was low, but every ear strained to hear. "They think humanity is fragile, ready to break. They are wrong. We will not hide. We will not beg. We will stand, and we will fight." The officers nodded, their faces set with steel. They had lost friends, seen blood on the decks, felt the fire of battle. And yet, their resolve was stronger than ever. The location of the Valari strike was clear: Arden Prime. The planet humanity had just reclaimed. To the Valari, it was an insult, a challenge. To humanity, it was a symbol. Both sides would not abandon it. The hours passed quickly. Repairs were rushed, weapons loaded, shields recharged. Soldiers prayed in silence, engineers worked with burned hands, and medics sharpened their knives. Everyone knew what was coming. When the Valari Armada arrived, the sky itself seemed to shatter. Dozens upon dozens of warships filled the void, their formations perfect, their weapons blazing with power. The sheer size of it made even hardened soldiers whisper in awe. And then, another fleet appeared, Krull warships. They did not join the Valari, nor the humans. They hovered like predators at the edge of the battlefield, watching. Waiting. The Resolute's bridge filled with tension. Talia muttered, "They want to see who bleeds before they strike." Eric's eyes stayed cold. "Then let them watch." The Valari commander's voice filled the comms, sharp and proud. Humans, this is your end. Surrender, and your deaths will be quick. Resist, and your entire race will burn. Eric answered with iron in his tone. We do not surrender. Not today. Not ever. The battle began. The Valari armada surged forward, beams of green fire cutting across the void. The human fleet answered with rail cannons and missiles, the void exploding in storms of light. Ships clashed like titans, shields flaring, hulls cracking. The Resolute shook violently as blasts hammered its side. Sparks burst from the ceiling, smoke filled the air, but the crew held their posts. Shields at 60%, an officer cried. Target their battleships. Eric ordered. Break their spine. Human weapons thundered. A Valari battleship shuddered, broke apart, and exploded in a storm of fire. Cheers erupted, but the victory was brief. 2 human frigates were lost in the same moment, torn apart by enemy beams. The battle raged, brutal and merciless. The Krall fleet still watched from afar, their warlord laughing as the carnage grew. On the ground of Arden Prime, human soldiers fought their own battle. Valari troops poured down from orbit, their weapons blazing. The ruins became firestorms, every street a battlefield. Human marines fought with grit and fury, refusing to yield even an inch of soil. Above, the Valari pressed harder. Wave after wave, their ships hammered the human fleet, trying to crush them with sheer numbers. The Resolute system screamed, shields falling to 30%. Captain! Talia shouted. We can't hold much longer. Eric's eyes burned with fire. Then we strike now. He gave the order, and the Resolute unleashed its plasma storm generator once more. White-blue fire erupted across space, frying Valari systems, tearing through shields. Dozens of alien ships faltered, their weapons falling silent. The human fleet surged forward, tearing through the wounded armada. But the cost was brutal. The Resolute shook, its systems drained, its engines faltering. Another human destroyer was lost. Then another. The fleet was bleeding, victory uncertain. And then, the Krall moved. Their warships surged forward, not toward the Valari, but straight into the chaos. They opened fire on both sides, laughing as they killed Valari and humans alike. To them, this was glory, this was the test they craved. The battlefield turned into madness. 3 fleets now clashed, fire filling the void, wreckage drifting everywhere. On the bridge of the Resolute, Talia's voice was sharp with disbelief. They're attacking everyone. They don't care who wins. Eric's voice was calm, even as the ship burned around him. Then we remind them, we are not prey. We are predators. The crew roared in answer, their resolve unbroken. The battle for Arden Prime had become a war of 3 empires. And the galaxy was watching. The void burned with fire. Valari warships rained destruction. Krall vessels howled through the chaos, attacking all sides. Human ships bled, shields cracked, hulls split open. The battle for Arden Prime had become madness. On the Resolute, alarms screamed. Sparks fell like rain, smoke filled the bridge, officers shouted over the roar of dying systems. Captain, we've lost another destroyer. Shields at 15%. Engines failing. But Captain Eric stood firm, his eyes fixed on the tactical map. The Valari pressed with overwhelming force. The Krall tore through anything that moved. And yet, he saw something. A chance. Commander Talia, he said. His voice cut through the chaos like steel. What is the status of the plasma storm generator? Overloaded, Captain. If we fire it again, it could tear the Resolute apart. Eric's eyes did not waver. Then we don't fire it at one ship. We fire it at all of them. The bridge fell silent. Officers stared in shock. Talia's face hardened. You mean, detonate it? Eric gave a single nod. Yes. A storm so wide it burns the whole battlefield. If we fall, we make sure the galaxy never forgets what it means to face humanity. The crew exchanged looks. Fear. Resolve. Then one by one, they nodded. They understood. Prepare the overload, Eric ordered. Below, on the surface of Arden Prime, human soldiers fought through rubble and flame. Valari troops pushed hard, their numbers endless, but the Marines held fast. They heard the comms from orbit, the word spreading like fire. The Resolute was about to unleash something terrible. The Valari commander laughed when he heard. Desperate tricks. Humans are finished. The Krall warlord, watching the energy build on the Resolute, paused. His laughter stopped. His voice rumbled with respect. So, the humans still bite. On the bridge, the ship shook violently. Energy crackled across the hull. The plasma storm generator roared, its core screaming as it charged beyond its limits. Lights flickered, panels exploded, but the crew did not move from their stations. Overload in 30 seconds, shouted an officer. Eric looked at his crew, at Talia, at the faces burned and bloodied but unbroken. No matter what happens, he said, today we prove humanity does not die quietly. Today, the galaxy remembers us. The storm built. The Resolute glowed like a star, energy spilling from its frame. Valari ships turned their weapons toward it, desperate to stop what they suddenly understood. The Krall pulled back, their warlord roaring with excitement. 10 seconds. The crew braced. Soldiers on the ground raised their fists to the sky. Across the galaxy, watchers leaned forward, eyes locked on the glowing human flagship. And then, Eric gave the order. Release. The Resolute unleashed the storm. A wave of white-blue fire exploded outward, ripping across the void. Valari shields shattered, their ships frying like insects in flame. Entire squadrons died in silence, their hulls breaking apart under the storm. Even Krall warships staggered, their engines flickering, their laughter turning to shock. The battlefield became light, so bright it blinded sensors, so fierce it silenced comms. When the storm faded, silence ruled. The Valari armada was broken. Wreckage drifted through the void, their proud battleships reduced to burning shells. The Krall fleet pulled away, damaged but alive, their warlord's laughter echoing through the comms one last time. You fight like demons, he growled. This is not the end, humans. This is the beginning. Next time, we test you again. And then they were gone. In orbit, only a handful of human ships remained, battered but alive. And at the center, the Resolute floated, scarred, burning, but still standing. On the bridge, smoke filled the air. Systems were dead, consoles sparking, but the crew cheered. They had survived. They had won. Eric stood tall, his uniform torn, blood on his brow. He looked at the stars, his voice quiet but certain. Send the message. To every world, every empire. Humanity is not finished. Humanity is here. The beacon flared once more, stronger than ever. Across the galaxy, signals carried the truth. The Valari had been defeated, the Krall tested, the impossible had been done. Some worlds trembled. Some cheered. Some plotted. But none could deny it. Humanity had returned. On the surface of Arden Prime, soldiers raised their weapons to the sky, voices echoing across the ruins. They were battered, bloodied, but alive. The human flag waved in the burning winds, no longer just a memory, but a promise. The promise that the galaxy would never again forget the name of humanity. And in the silence that followed, every empire knew one truth. The war was only beginning.